Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, for the past few weeks, we have been focusing on the second canto, very specifically on the ninth chapter. And the reason for spending an extraordinary amount of time is because the ninth chapter has the Chatushloki, the four verses that are considered to be the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. The essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, as in the digest of Srimad Bhagavatam as revealed by Narayana, Krishna himself, to Lord Brahma. And then this essence was conveyed, the summary was conveyed to Sri Narad Muni. Sri Narad Muni conveyed the same to Srila Vyasadeva. And what is very important for us to realize is that the four verses are summarizing and representing 18,000 verses. The 18,000 verses are a natural commentary of the 550 Vedanta Sutras, which basically is the fundamental foundational Shastra that is used by different Sampradayas to prove their point. The Shankarites, the followers of Shankaracharya, they have a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. The followers of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, they all have their respective commentaries. Our commentary in the line of Lord Chaitanya was authored by Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan. It is called the Govinda Bhashya, and this Govinda Bhashya is basically inspired by Radha Govindaji in Jaipur. And because it was inspired by the deities Radha Govindaji in Jaipur, it was automatically considered to be Govinda Bhashya, because without the help of Govinda, Govinda himself, Sri Radha Govinda themselves came and instructed Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu, and he completed the summary for us in 7 days. The Vaishnava Acharyas in our lineage, they never felt a need for any commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. They never felt a need. The Srimad Bhagavatam was considered to be the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. The Vedanta Sutras in themselves are said to be the conclusion or the endpoint of the Vedas, or rather the most important aspect of the Vedas, conclusion of the Vedas are being presented in the Vedanta Sutra. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Rupa Goswami, our primary teachers, because Srila Rupa Goswami received his inspiration from Mahaprabhu directly, they never felt a need for a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras because they had Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam was considered to be a natural commentary because it focused on the most essential of topics as given by the Vedanta Sutra, completely freed from the, I would say, the objectives of Karma Kanda, completely freed from the objectives of even wanting to liberate themselves from the planet, completely freed from Karma and Jnana Kanda versions. As a consequence, it was considered to be the most sublime truth, the natural commentary. They never felt the need. But then there was a lot of challenges. The challenges was basically in terms of establishing the bona fide nature, and saying otherwise, concluding and coming up with being able to present ourselves as a bona fide sampradaya. That became a challenge because it was challenged in Jaipur, it was challenged in other places. And as a consequence, the commentary was required, and that's why we have the Govinda Bhashya. But in reality, Mahaprabhu never felt there was a need for a commentary because we already had Srimad Bhagavatam to start with, to begin with. It's a natural commentary. It is not by any means, an ordinary circumstance if the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be a natural commentary of the Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra is supposed to be the conclusion of all Vedic truth, which includes billions of verses. And these 4 verses are supposed to be the verses for Srimad Bhagavatam. What do we mean by foundation? To understand foundation from the perspective of philosophy, to understand it by the nature of what we are trying to study. When we use the word transcendence and we describe transcendence as being the nature of the soul is transcendental by nature, Krishna is transcendental by nature, then transcendence in itself is being described by the three words Sat, Chit, Ananda. Ananda, which is pleasure, happiness, is included in the end because Ananda is the objective, because the soul is a pleasure seeker by nature. You can't really walk away from the fact that we are seeking happiness, and there is absolutely no shame in it because that's the nature of the Atma. However, Ananda, when we talk about Ananda or pleasure of the soul, it has to have certain characteristics. The happiness that is pursued by the soul, Ananda, has to be eternal. It cannot be interrupted by time. You cannot have one of the parties leaving the bodies and the story ends. You know, like we notice in mundane literature, in many kathas, you will notice that the hero perishes or the heroine leaves him. You know, there's an abrupt end because of the fact that there is an end to the characters, there is an end to the environment, perhaps, there's an end to the nature of happiness. So it is flittering. So the first principle of happiness is it has to be eternal. That is Ananda. Ananda has to have Sat. Without Sat, there is no Ananda, because if it is going to be interrupted, then it is not really absolute by nature. It is relative because it has a beginning, it has an end. Some people will say it's good, some people will say it's not good. It is not absolute by nature. But the whole idea of absolute means it has to be truthful. Truth means it has to be truth all the time. As a consequence, the pursuit of happiness of the soul has to be eternal. That's the first principle. Sat and Ananda are very important. Now, one can't really experience pleasure in amnesia. One can't really experience pleasure in ignorance. As a consequence, if one has to fall in love with someone, then they need to know who they are, who the opposite party is, and they need to have complete knowledge of the environment. They need to understand what is truth and what is mistruth. They need to be able to constantly align themselves so that they could be available in the service of the beloved. You see, making ourselves constantly available in the service of the beloved, practically being able to focus is the whole idea so that we are able to do it naturally. So the point is, Ananda has the requirement that it has to be eternal, Sat. Ananda also has the requirement that it has to be filled with knowledge. Unfortunately, in the material world, regardless of how knowledgeable we may claim we are, in reality, we always face issues of illusion. We face issues of incomplete knowledge. We are in delusion. We also make mistakes. All of this is a part of what we would call as material knowledge. As a consequence, Chit by nature has to define the relationship. So if one is in a relationship in the pursuit of pleasure and they want it to be eternal, it also has to have the ingredient of knowledge. Chit has to be present. Now, Chit in itself means that one has to know who they are and one has to know who the opposite party is. They need to know the kshetra, the environment they're operating in, which means they need to know whether whatever they're pursuing is temporal or is it transcendental, is it eternal. They need to know the environment so that there is really no what we would call as confusion about the environment which they are in. So there is no confusion. There's really no challenge in them understanding where they are and what they do. So now the point we are trying to make is that Sat, Chit, and Ananda are all the characteristics that are required for one to be called transcendental. So there has to be the whole concept of pleasure, because the soul by nature is pleasure seeking. You know, it's a pleasure seeking. By nature, we are pleasure seeking. So we can't really say that we are seeking distress. We can't really say that we are seeking some kind of sorrow. The answer is we are pleasure seekers by nature. The problem is that we have to have the other two qualities also as a part of the pleasure seeking objective. Eternality has to be present, which means we and the object of love both have to be eternal. one has to have knowledge about who we are. We need to know who the other party is. And as a consequence, without knowledge, one is not very efficient in being able to experience Ananda because it's incomplete. Now, if you observe the Chatushloki, the Chatushloki in reality is touching upon the qualities of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. The last verse of the Chatushloki talks about pursuing the absolute truth. What does it mean to pursue the absolute truth? What is the absolute nature of the soul? The absolute nature of the soul is Sat, Chit, Ananda. As a consequence, the soul is basically heading towards wanting to experience eternal joy that is filled with knowledge. Sat, Chit, Ananda. The 4 verses of Srimad Bhāgavatam practically delineate the fact that if your objectives are not Narayana, because Narayana is in the beginning, Narayana is in the middle, Narayana is in the end. If your objective is not Narayana, you're off track. Now, Narayana has different names. He is known as Krishna, he is known as Narasimha, he is known as Vamana. But the point is, you're pursuing a dalliance or you're pursuing a relationship with an eternal personality. If the eternality is missing, you're in trouble. So the first point is you have to find a relationship with Narayana. That is the first verse of the Chatushloki. Second verse of the Chatushloki talks about saying that if you engage in activity, which is in reality, activity means pleasure seeking requires not an inert existence. Pleasure seeking is all about being able to interact and serve. Service is happiness, service is bliss, service is Ananda. But then you need to find out what activity belongs to the category of being connected to the eternal person and that which is not connected to the eternal person. So that is the second verse. Basically, Narayana himself is saying, first, I am the one who exists eternally. Next, he's saying, you better find out if the activity that you're engaging in has a relationship with me, because if it doesn't, it is extraordinarily temporary. It does into the definition of what is the nature of the soul and the quality of happiness the soul is seeking. That is the second verse. The third verse practically talks about the fact that regardless of the environment that you are in, if you can identify the eternal relationship, the environment itself will not affect you. So the universal elements that surround the supersoul, the Paramatma who is sitting in our heart, he sits in the body of a hog. He sits in the body of a stool-eating pig that immerses itself in a sewer. You can find out, you can literally see them completely, I would say, blissful in sewer. And then the Paramatma is in the body of the hog. He is giving intelligence to that particular soul, who is also entrapped in the body of the hog. But is he affected by the conditioning of that hog? That hog is seeking pleasure in the sewer. Is the Paramatma affected by being there? The answer is no, which means he is not affected by the influence of the material elements. He is saying that sometimes the material elements, they're definitely coming into the universe, but I'm not affected, which also means that if we develop a relationship with him, we also understand the eternal nature, despite being in circumstances that are extraordinarily difficult because of being covered over by the material elements, we will still not experience the extraordinary negativity that can be practically imposed upon us because we have identified with our eternal relationship. So Ananda also requires that we engage in activity that is eternal with the object of our love, who is eternal. And then we also have the ability to become eternal, because these are all the qualities. As a consequence, even being in this body, we can exist like the Paramatma, not being affected by this body. You see, this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada has given us the ability to practically reach the spiritual sky and be in the spiritual sky whilst being in this body. This is the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, passed on by Srila Prabhupada around the world. By being in this material body, which is filled with all kinds of challenges, we can still experience it fully. Yeah? We can experience the spiritual sky fully. This is the third statement of the Chatushloki, where the Lord is not affected while he is Paramatma, neither will we be if we qualitatively increase our consciousness to meet the same quality as Krishna. This is the whole objective of the International Movement for Krishna Consciousness. This is the whole objective of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is for us to develop consciousness like Krishna so that we can exist in this body and we can serve him in the eternal realm whilst not being affected by this body. This is the third verse. The fourth verse practically affirms the fact that if you don't have Sat, if you don't have Chit, and you don't have Ananda, period. There is no such thing as Ananda without Sat and Chit. This is the Chatushloki. Now, the point is, now, where is it that you can find unsullied, sublime versions of Chatushloki? Where is it that you can find this whole concept being discussed where there's an external focus, there's an intense focus, where there's no objective that is being discussed, which is temporal. There's no objective that is being discussed that is temporary. Where would we find this? We would find this in the Srimad Bhāgavatam. That is the beauty of Srimad Bhāgavatam. The Srimad Bhāgavatam does not deal with topics that deal with fruitive activity, does not deal with even the objective of simply leaving our bodies, because Ananda cannot never be experienced without service. How can you experience Ananda on your own? You need to be with someone. The beloved is in the spiritual sky. He is waiting for us. As a consequence, we don't even believe in the concept of eternality without Krishna. We want relationships. We want to interact. We want pleasure, yes, but the pleasure is in service. And the pleasure is in serving the eternal object of love, while we ourselves recognize our eternality. As a consequence, you cannot really say that one can be happy in isolation. Why the Srimad Bhāgavatam doesn't believe in Jnana-kanda, which simply promises departure from the material sky. For us, the departure from material sky is a very low benchmark. Departure from the material sky is a very low benchmark. It's a very low bar in what you can achieve in terms of what has been given by Mahaprabhu. So we should never set our objectives as to be simply freed from our own challenges. Freeing ourselves from our challenges is something that Krishna would arrange automatically. He would arrange automatically, because the more and more we strive to want to serve him, he will arrange. And then he's telling us, Trinadapi sunichena taroriva saishnuna. He's saying, you tolerate your circumstances and then call upon my name, come in touch with me through various means, and you will come back for sure. This is what is being promised by him in 4.9. He is then giving us an entire process of basically the different steps in the Bhagavad Gita for us to reach him. The point we are trying to make here is that the Chatushloki touches upon the most important ingredients of understanding Srimad Bhagavatam. Is founded upon the principle where the objectives are completely eternal. The objective of love is being put forth in the forefront. Love has to have the characteristics of eternality. It has to have the characteristics of complete knowledge. One can't just love in ignorance. As a consequence, Sat, Chit, and Ananda, this becomes the foundation of Srimad Bhagavatam. No temporary objectives. No temporary objectives. And it is Krishna whom we come in touch with. Nam becomes the sadhana. Nam also becomes the sadhya, the goal. This is the beauty of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that is the foundational principle that was conveyed by Narayana to Lord Brahma to Sri Narad Muni to Vyasadeva, and then to the different acharyas in a lineage. Now, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is then split into 12 cantos, but then we talk about the cantos themselves. So here, the next chapter, which is chapter 10, talks about the 10 characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam. The 10 characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam particularly are to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. The 10 characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam is to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, but the objective itself is to understand Krishna, who is the Samam Bonam, the 10th canto. But in preparation to understanding the 10th canto, which is the 10th objective, one has to go through the remaining 9. And the remaining 9 are being described in the remaining 9 cantos. So do we understand where we are going now? We are practically wanting to understand the Samam Bonam, which is Krishna himself. But to understand Krishna himself, which is the objective of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Krishna being glorified as Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, which is practically the Paribhasha Sutra, where we are going to say that Krishna is the avatari, the rasa or relationship found in Vraja is the origin of all relationships. But then to arrive at this conclusion and to understand the rasa presented in Vraja, one needs to go through the different avatars and the descendants, or the different avatars and the different manifestations of the different avatars in different yugas, their functions and the relationships. Now that becomes the 10 different characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam. All of this is founded upon the principle of the 4 shlokas that we read in the 9 chapter. Yeah, 2.9 chapter. And it is founded on the principle that we are in the pursuit of understanding what is the absolute nature of happiness. If you want to talk about the absolute nature of happiness, absolute equals Sat. It has to be eternal by nature. You can never call something absolute unless it has the characteristics of eternality, because it cannot change. Truth that is relative can never be called absolute. Yeah. So we need an absolute anchor, an absolute function. As a consequence, the pursuit of the absolute truth, which is the objective of Bhagavatam. Then we are also talking about the nature of understanding Sambandha. Without understanding who we are, we know who the opposite party is. And that principle is Chit. Chit is all about knowing who we are, who the opposite party is, and we also need to know how to serve them. Yeah. So this is Sambandha and Abhideya. Ananda is Prayojana Tattva, which is practically the objective, is understanding the nature of the soul. The happiness of the nature of the soul comes from service. Yeah. So that is what is being spoken of, but then it is being divided into 10 cantos so that we understand that as we approach the 10th canto, we're going to look at the different manifestations of absolute truth and the world through the eyes of Srimad Bhagavatam, so that when we do come to the 10th canto, we can fully participate in the 10th canto. So that's the whole objective. Chatushloki practically sets the foundation. Then we're going through the different cantos. We see the different avatars, the leelas. Some of the avatars are inferences. So, there are inferences that are being made to understand stories. There are different kinds of kathas being spoken within Bhagavatam. There are different instances being spoken. All of this is particularly to establish the 4 different principles or 4 shlokas of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then ultimately to prepare us to finally reach a conclusion, or rather come to Krishna, so that we can understand Krishna in the 10th canto. That's why it's also said that one doesn't really, so you need to go on a step-by-step basis. Now, one moment. Let us go into the chapter 10. The first verse is Sri Shukadev Goswami said, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: creation of the universe, subcreation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, creative impetus, the change of the manus, the signs of God, returning home, back to Godhead, liberation, and the summum bonum. Yeah, these are the 10 different divisions of statements regarding. All of these are supporting the Chatushloki. These are not independent of the Chatushloki. All of these will have characteristics where we will be able to see the principles of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, the principles of Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana as well. Say, sometimes we might find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that they are discussing a somewhat temporary objective of an individual. Yeah? This will fall in the second verse of the Chatushloki. We need to recognize the remaining. We need to recognize the Bhagavatam by constantly viewing the Bhagavatam through the filter of the Chatushloki. That would be the most appropriate way to learn. Why it's very foundational, it is the most important essence. So when we start looking at everything from the perspective of what is established in the Chatushloki, then we will understand that there are some instances in Srimad Bhagavatam which are highlighting what is temporary. There are some instances that are highlighting what is permanent. There are some objectives set by people which are temporary, some objectives that are permanent. So you will have a lot of learning where the topics move from different verses of the Chatushloki. Yeah? So this is very, very important for us to know what we are going into, so that if we become very clear on the foundation, then we can understand what is the chapter, each and every canto, and different avatars of the Lord, different interactions, different souls who are of a very high nature, but their objectives themselves may not really be fully acceptable. Then you can look at the objective, you can look at the the outcome. So for example, in the 6th canto, the Prajapati is worshipping Vishnu, and he is worshipping Vishnu with a certain mantra, and he is engaging in tapasya. And this tapasya and this austerity and the chanting of the mantra is all because he's not able to function in his role. What is his role? His role is to populate the universe. He is not able to function in the population of the universe efficiently because there are certain challenges he is experiencing. So he is basically wanting the obstacles to be removed. So he's engaging in very severe austerities and worshipping Krishna, but the objective is not to serve Krishna. The objective itself is for him to do what he is here to do in terms of being a Prajapati. Now we understand that Krishna himself appears in that particular sixth canto. When he appears, he does not appear in the two-arm form with a flute and with cows in Vraja. He appears with 10 different arms. Why does Krishna appear with 10 different arms? The 10 different arms with weapons. You see the deities with 10 different arms with weapons. What do they represent? They represent the 10 different directions. There is up and down. These are two directions. Then you have north. Then you have basically, so you have east, southeast, south, southwest, west. Then you have, northwest, and then you have north, and then you have northeast. These 8 different cardinal directions. So in any different place, there are 8 different cardinal directions, and then there's up and down. So these are 10 different directions. Karma yoga in this universe can only occur in one of these 10 different directions. What does it mean? It means that there are principles of karma yoga that can be carried out where these 10 different directions and their basic controllers can either help you or they can cause obstacles. Functions of life, there are different professions, etc., and different objectives. These can all be blocked and unblocked. So the weapons of the Lord are meant to remove the obstacles faced in the 10 different directions by those who want to engage in karma yoga. So there, the Prajapati in the 6th canto is not having the objective of wanting to experience a relationship with the Lord. So if you put that particular experience or put that particular chapter and the katha through the 4 verses of Chatushloki, you will find that his objective is temporal. It is not eternal. You will find that, yes, he is worshipping the Supreme Lord, but yet he is wanting to serve him, but his objectives themselves are somewhat connected to the material universe. They are of a temporary nature. So the Lord himself appears, but when he appears, he grants him his desire of removing obstacles, and then he disappears. He's not there in front of him. He is engaging in seva after that. The point is, he is not wanting that. He's not there to serve Krishna. He is wanting to accomplish removing the obstacles. So Krishna comes, removes the obstacles, Krishna is gone, the person is engaging in service. The point is, that particular episode, you can put it through the 4 verses, and you will find that you can basically analyze the verses, that particular episode, in terms of whether it meets the qualities of, the objective of Srimad Bhāgavatam. But Srimad Bhāgavatam mentions that incident. So the 10 characteristics of Srimad Bhāgavatam, you will find some translations, you would find some inferences, you would find katha. All of these are to simply educate us as to what is present and what is not present. Even though the Lord is involved, there are many objectives in the hearts of the worshippers that may be temporary. So that is being highlighted. That is why here they talk about the fact that there are 10 different characteristics, and one needs to go through all of these before you come to Krishna, the 10th canto, the Samambonam. Yeah? So the next verse reads, to isolate the transcendence of the Samambonam, the symptoms of the rest are described sometimes by Vedic inference, which is praman. Praman means proof, but it is not direct proof. It is basically anuman. It's an inference. Some incident occurred someplace. You can make certain inferences based on that incident. So that is being described. Yeah. So sometimes by direct explanation, sometimes by summary explanations given by the great sages. So Shrutena, yeah, they are basically talking about the Lakshanaham. Lakshana means the characteristics. And here they're saying Shrutena by Vedic evidences, Arthena, direct explanation, and Agyasa, summary. All of these are being used to describe different incidents in the 9 cantos preceding, where we can understand the Lord in the 10th canto more clearly by processing all of this. The elementary creation of 16 items of matter namely the 5 elements: fire, water, land, air, and sky. Now, fire, water, land, air, and sky. Sky is Akash. That's a very somewhat of a difficult translation to make because there isn't an appropriate translation for Akash Tattva. So when we use the word Agni, so there is first Prithvi, there is Jala, Agni, Vayu, 5 different tattvas. The Akash Tattva is sound. In English, they equate it to the sky. Yeah. Air is to touch, because when you touch your hand with someone else, or when you touch an object, you're basically touching with the help of a cushion of air that is between that which you touch and your own fingers. So if you keep both of your hands together, like doing namaste, there's a cushion of air that is separating the 2 fingers that allows us to touch and experience the nature of touch. So Akash is sound, touch is through air, and then fire has a form. In general, you can look at the form of the fire. And then you have water, and Prithvi you can smell. Then there are different sense organs associated with the 5 elements. So the 5 elements have certain functions. So you have 5 plus 5, and then there are sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind. This is called Sarga, which means these are 15 elements. Subsequent interaction with the material modes is called Visarga. What does it mean? It means basically that the Lord impregnates the impressions or the basic blueprint of creation into the material elements. But they themselves are inert. So when we talk about Mahat Tattva, when we talk about the lump of clay, it is a lump of earth that is existing before creation. That particular lump of earth has the characteristics of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Yeah, ether. But by themselves, the material elements do not have the ability to create form. In other words, they can't really interact. The Lord impregnates these with life by practically glancing at material nature. The impregnation of material nature by the glance of the Lord, that is personified by Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati. Mother Parvati is material nature. The glance of the Lord is Lord Shiva. So the interaction between Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati practically starts the whole process of creation. In other words, they are the universal father and mother in the material world. That is the reason why they are called father and mother, is because Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati. Yeah. So Mother Parvati is material nature. Her different manifestations, for example, are, you can know her as Mother Durga, but then she is also primordial nature in terms of what is called material nature. The Lord is glancing. The Lord who is lying on the causal ocean is glancing. That glance becomes personified as Lord Shiva. Please understand. That is why Lord Shiva is not considered to be Jiva. He is not considered Vishnu. He is practically the Lord's glance, which is not, but he is coming in touch with material nature. Now material nature has life. It is going to start reacting with each other. It can start forming shapes, forms, different bodies, etc., because now there's life. Yeah. So this point which you're trying to make here is that there is Sarga, that which is before impregnation with life, and there is Visarga. When these two come together, yeah, the resultant interaction, when these two come together, then there is something which is basically called what we see as different forms of life. Yeah. So there are basically 15 different aspects of the elements. And then you also have the interaction of Jiva with these elements. The life force is induced into these elements. How the life force is induced into these elements is the function of Lord Shiva and the Divine Mother, Parvati, his consort. They manage the universe. That is why she is called material nature. And he is the consort. He is the controller of Mother Durga, Lord Shiva. And this interaction, before it happens, there is a certain form, which is basically contains certain information. Once life is given, the interaction begins. That is the material mode of nature. There's interaction here. Yeah. So understand it this way. Understand that the Lord who is lying on the causal ocean, he has the conception of what is expected within him. It is a conception. It is a sublime conception. It is subtle. It is like an idea in our heads. But the idea itself, when you use your limbs and you start shaping the clay according to the idea, it becomes something. So that whole process was described in the previous verse. So the Lord is lying on the causal ocean. He has an idea of what to do. That particular idea is already being impregnated with life. And then you see all these interactions and you have the rest of the universe forming. And then you have the interaction of the elements. Then you have different people with different ideas. Different people want to construct different kinds of buildings. They like certain colors. They like, they dislike certain colors. Some people like to use one kind of material while the other kind of material is used by others. All these interactions come in because there's life. Before that, there are elements. Yeah? But all these ideas, all these universes are existing in a subtle form in Sri Karanodakashai Vishnu. The gross form is already left in the material world. He is glancing at the material world and he is practically impregnating the material world with his influence, with life, and as a consequence, everything starts moving. Yeah? This is somewhat to be understood by us in the same way as we would do things. We will have an idea. The idea requires certain structure, and then we start putting things in place, and the idea takes form and then shape, and then eventually you have something, some kind of a creation. So that is what is being explained. Okay, so one moment, please. First, the right situation for the living entities is to obey the laws of the Lord and thus be in perfect peace of mind under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The manus and the laws are meant to give right direction of life. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Yeah, the impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. See, this was very clearly understood by Adam Smith. Yeah, we all should know who Adam Smith is. Adam Smith is the father of the modern capitalism. He is the father of modern economic theory. And Adam Smith, he was quite dysfunctional. Functional because he was considered to not be of very stable mind during his time, during the 17th, 18th century. And he was originally from Scotland, and I think he did a lot of work in the Oxford University. And every year, back in the 1990s and 2000, even between 2000 and 2010, all the chairmen of the Federal Reserve of America, the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, and then you have the other guys who followed him, to go to a little place in Scotland every year to celebrate the birthday of Adam Smith. Why was Adam Smith considered to be the father of modern economic theory? It's because he understood that by nature, everyone will be motivated by their selfishness more than anything else. You see? Modern capitalistic theory and modern Western economics is based on the fact that every individual is selfish by nature, and if you give them the perfect and selfishness, protect their environment so that they don't hurt each other, give them security, give them all of those things, they will exercise their selfishness, but that selfishness in itself will become necessarily a benefit for the rest of society because they are acting on their selfish interests. They might end up doing things which are right, and then the rest of the crowd is also selfish, and then they are looking at what is being produced, and if they like it, they will accept it. If not, they will reject it. This whole theory of capitalism, of allowing human beings their very selfish goals at the detriment of everybody else, and because they are selfish, they will achieve things, and you don't need to do anything else. This is the predicate or the foundation of modern economic theory. Every once in a few years, you will find the stock market crashing. It happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, the big crash in our lifetime. And when it happened in 2007, 2008, 2009, this theory of Adam Smith was put to test, because those who were very selfish pushed the entire world into basically beyond the cliff. They pushed the entire world into a depression, almost into chaos. Everybody lost their wealth because everybody was pursuing their selfish goals. Okay, this was put to test. Then I remember reading once during the 2008, 2009 timeframe, there were many professors of economics from Princeton, Harvard, who were all denouncing this theory of economics, saying mankind should not be allowed to pursue their goal in isolated selfishness. They should be monitored, they should be fettered, contained. You see, that went against it. So the point I'm trying to make is the fundamental motivation for fruitive desire is also being talked about here in Srimad Bhāgavatam. And here it is said, the impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Fruitive work means I want something. I want something. I find something that is missing in my life. I have figured out how to get to that particular goal, and I have a process. I'm going to put all my efforts into that process. I'm going to achieve that particular goal. Yeah. And then this is basically very much within the material sphere. There can be material improvements. You can go from one planet to the other, which is not a bad idea. You jump from one branch to the other in the same tree. You can go from one country to the other in the pursuit of happiness. We all have experienced that. Most of us are from the Indian subcontinent, and our forefathers, or we ourselves, are perhaps first generation migrants and immigrants to the West. We all went with an idea that one place is better than the other. And the point being that this is also very foundational for the modern capitalistic economic theory, that if you allow people to pursue their fruitive activity, they would really put all their efforts behind it because they have very selfish desires. And as a consequence, they will do what is best. And that particular best could also be beneficial for the rest of the world. The flaw is they thought it will be beneficial. That is the flaw. In reality, it's never beneficial. It's never beneficial. It can never be beneficial fully. But this is the practical foundation of economic theory. And here it's being mentioned here that the manus and the laws are meant to give right direction of life. If the selfishness is let go of, if the selfishness is allowed unfettered, then there's trouble. There will be chaos, because whoever pursues selfishness would do so at the detriment. This was not understood by Adam Smith. He himself was quite dysfunctional. He used to walk in the night, talking to himself, not knowing where to go and what to do, and he used to be brought back home. So there were a lot of theories about his mental health. But the point is, he became very foundational for all the theories and all the courses in Harvard and Princeton and whatnot. He is the father of modern economic theory and the success of the Western world and capitalism. But in reality, here, this verse is talking about the fact that the impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. You are pursuing a selfish motive, and that is why you become very motivated to do so. They're finding out what is motivation. But they're also saying here, the right situation for the living entity is to obey the laws of the Lord. You have to obey the laws of the Lord, not the laws created to fester, rather not the laws created to foster more selfishness. Modern laws are created at a very, very low moral principle. At a very low moral principle. Modern laws are not very high. They're very low in the order of, I would say, management of ethics. They're very low. You can never, ever achieve much based just on the modern law of what is morality and what is not morality. Relative, and it is extraordinarily selfish at different levels. The foundation is very shaky. It wouldn't stand the test of any scripture. Here, this is very important verse. Here they're talking about the right situation for the living entities is to obey the laws of the Lord, not just the morality expressed in the country we live in, but to obey the laws of the Lord. Understand that there is eternal principle. There is a necessity to understand what is eternal and what is temporal. To understand, that there are very, very important universal laws that have to be obeyed. And thus being a perfect peace of mind. Yeah? Peace of mind is for one who is in the mode of goodness. And in that particular mode, one realizes what is really the expression of law of the Lord under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Manus and their laws are meant to give right direction of life. So the Manus for each and every Manvantara set laws in motion. And those laws in motion are meant to give the right direction in life. And then this direction in life is supposed to govern our life on the planet. And we are supposed to understand that we can perform our fruitive desires and we can engage in fruitive work, but we are contained and managed by the laws of Manu. Yeah? The chaos of the present market, the present world, the present economic theory is the fact that they have nothing to do with eternality. They have really nothing to do with eternality. As a consequence, there's an element of destruction which has been sown right there in those principles. And you can imagine, that is why this dysfunction can be one of the most modern theories of economics. It was all put to test and it failed miserably. Yeah, the modern economic theory, it failed miserably in 2007 to 2010. And they all learn one lesson at a time. You see, that's the beauty. Between 2007, 2010, whatever happened in a financial crisis, they learned one lesson. They learned never to give too much money without checking your documents for, mortgages. They just learn one lesson. They don't learn the whole thing. They just learn one lesson, and then the whole market again goes forward. Unbelievable. It's just unbelievable how, things move forward despite such chaos. But that is being addressed in this verse. Srimad Bhāgavatam, if you understand Srimad Bhāgavatam, you will understand every form of knowledge that is out there. You will understand every form of knowledge which is out there if you understand Srimad Bhāgavatam. It's quite interesting. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Yeah? People don't really start moving and get energetic unless there's motivation, which is generally selfish because they want to achieve a certain fruit. That is being touched upon here. But they're saying, even if you do so, you have to do so under the protection of the Lord. And you also have to do so following the code of Manu. Interesting how some very deep topics in the Srimad Bhāgavatam, you can just apply it and find why we are failing in many areas in the world. Text 5. The science of God describes the incarnations of the personality of Godhead and his different activities together with the activities of his great devotees. Yeah. So I think I'm going to stop here, but it's almost 6 o'clock. I'll take questions. This is text 5 of the chapter. Science of God describes the incarnations of the personality of Godhead and his different activities together with the activities of his different devotees. Yeah, because this is actually quite a very intricate chapter. And I want to go a little slow so that we could take maybe 5 verses and then we could summarize and we could move forward. I'll stop here and then I'll take some questions for today and we will go further in the subsequent sessions. Any questions?
Hare
Krishna, Mataji, actually your sound is coming very broken.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I'm from Jaslapad. Not sure if in the meantime you want me to go forward.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So Prabhuji, while you're so wonderful lecture, Prabhuji, and you went really quite in details. Thank you so much for that. It's very enlightening. Question I have, Prabhuji, is about Mother Nature and Parvati. So you mentioned that it's Parvati. So I have a few questions around it. A little confused about it. Idea is when we read, it said that it's Krishna's Bahiranga Shakti, and because of that, it is under the material, like it's below the Jiva Tattva, which is Tatastha. Now, if Jiva is superior, then how do we, reconcile our mind that we worship Mother Parvati or Mother Nature?
Let me, can I answer that before I go anywhere? Because that will help.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so first and foremost, we are Tatastha. when we talk about three different potencies, there is internal potency, which is a spiritual potency of the Lord. There is external potency, which is the Bahiranga Shakti. And then there is the marginal potency, which has the ability to either be in the spiritual, which is internal, or be in the Bahiranga Shakti, depending on the motivation. Yeah. So these is basically the definition of three different types of Krishna's, separated energies, so to speak. However, we have to realize when they use the word Bahiranga Shakti, they are using the word inert matter. Okay, that is external energy. That entire external energy is being managed by Mother Parvati. So she is the external Shakti of the Lord, the external Shakti. She is the external Shakti of the Lord. In other words, the supervisor of material energy. Okay, the supervisor of material energy. The Jiva, which is a soul, which is called Tatastha, where the choose to be either a part of inert matter, or it can be a part of, Krishna's eternal nature, which is the Vaikuntha planets. Then that is what is being described as the Jiva being of a higher nature. Yeah. So we shouldn't confuse the fact that we are above, Mother Parvati. Mother Parvati, Shakti Tattva. We are Jiva Tattva. And then Krishna is Vishnu Tattva. Then there is Shiva Tattva. We are not Shakti Tattva. We are inferior to her. Yeah. She is Krishna's potency. So that is why she is worshipable. In this material world, she is Shakti Tattva, takes on the form of Mother Parvati. Then one who is inclined to engage with Krishna, we get taken care of by Krishna's internal potency, which is the spiritual side, which is called the Yoga Maya. So there is Yoga Maya, which is the spiritual side. Then there is Mahamaya. Mahamaya is Mother Parvati. One of the manifestations of Mahamaya is Parvati. So there is Parvati, there is Durga, there are so many different manifestations. But Mahamaya, and then there is Yogamaya, and then we are in the middle. These are Krishna's potencies. So when we are being told that we are superior, we are simply being told that we are superior because we have the qualities of Krishna, and we have the ability to make the choice to either go and be a part of that material manifestation, which is nothing but animation of inert matter, or we have the ability to be absorbed in our spiritual nature, which is purely spiritual, which is not touched by the external matter. Does it make sense? So we don't want to compare ourselves to the Divine Mother. No. Yeah.
Right, Prabhuji. So yeah, it does make sense, Prabhuji. But when you said, if I may ask the follow-up question, Prabhuji.
Yeah, please do.
So so when you're saying that when Lord is glancing on the Prakriti, and you said that it's an association between Parvati and Lord Shiva. Then glance is Lord Shiva, and then that's so. Is he glancing on the inert matter, or because you said that glance is the one which impregnates and then starts this secondary level creation?
Correct. So he is glancing on Mula Prakriti, which is inert matter. And the animation of inert matter happens due to life. That life comes through the agency of Lord Shiva. So the personification of the glance of the Lord is Lord Shiva. Everything has a personality. This glance becomes Lord Shiva. Does it make sense?
Yes, so that means because Mother Parvati is not that Prakriti, but she's the controller of that Prakriti. And
exactly.
That's why
she is the control.
Yes.
So I think we should go one step back. The glance of Mahavishnu is Lord Shiva. Rama, who is the consort of Mahavishnu, she expands into the consort of Lord Shiva. Yeah? So now the Lord and his consort have expanded into the glance Lord Shiva, and his consort the external energy, the Shakti, who accompanies Lord Shiva. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Any other question? I believe someone, I think Hemagopika has written a chat. Yeah. Can you please explain a bit more on Sarga, Visarga, and the idea of Mahavishnu impregnating nature before manifestation, after manifestation, etc.? I think it cleared your doubt, so I'm going to move on. If there is anything more, please do ask me. Any other question or comment? Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, we will end the session, but I was just wanting to again summarize. Many of you joined after the summary that was given in the beginning. I was summarizing the fact that the Chatushloki in itself is describing the pursuit of happiness by the soul. Yeah, the nature of the soul is to seek pleasure. That is the nature of the soul. To seek happiness is the nature of the soul. So when we talk about Ananda, it has to have the characteristics of eternality, because Ananda that is really considered to be Ananda, it has to be eternal by nature. In other words, it has to be never ending. Yeah, there should be no interruption. Then it should also have the characteristic of complete knowledge. So the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam talk about the quality of Satchit Ananda, and the rest of Srimad Bhagavatam practically bring about many different topics that are summary discussions, that are sometimes narrations, sometimes it is basically Shruti, yeah, what is already being shared by the Lord. All of these are being put together for the first 9 cantos. And these 9 cantos basically give us a good sense of wanting us to understand the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chatushloki. And the 10th canto, on the other hand, is basically the summum bonum, where we understand the full application of the Chatushloki, where this is also the objective of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the remaining 9 cantos are a preparation that reinforces a particular aspect of the 10th canto. Yeah. So we want to basically understand the remaining 9 cantos. The 10 different chapters and the 10 different topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam are being described in this chapter because they touch upon different aspects so that we can be prepared to fully understand the 10th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? So this is basically what it is. So we want you to understand basically that we're going to kind of go through the Chatushloki again and again in different ways so that we can somewhat, basically understand what is being spoken of in the different, in preparation for us to come in touch with Krishna. Okay? So we'll end today's session and we will continue again in the following week, and we will basically touch upon the remaining part of the chapter in the following week. If there are any questions, you may ask me in WhatsApp as well. Okay, there's a question here. 2.1.31, as marked above, is that common sense discussed here is stated in general terms, or is it applies only in understanding this verse? If it is, okay, first of all, 2.1.31, this is basically a doubt which is being asked of a different chapter, but we will do it anyway because we have time, so we can just go there. One moment. So I think you're talking about, one moment here. 1 second, please. I'm just looking into it. Is it 2.1.31? Okay, 2.1.30. Yeah, the sphere of outer space constitutes his eye pits, and the eyeball is the sun as the power of seeing. His eyelids are both the day and night, and the movements of his eyebrows. The Brahma and similar supreme personalities reside. His palate is the director of water, Varuna, and the juice or essence of everything is his tongue. To common sense, the description in this verse appears to be somewhat contradictory. Yeah, because sometimes the sun has become described as the eyeball, sometimes as the outer space sphere. But there is no room for common sense in the injunctions of the Shastras. Yeah, we must accept the description of the Shastras and concentrate more on the form of the Virat Rupa than on common sense. Common sense is always imperfect, whereas the description in the Shastras is always perfect and complete. If there is any incongruity, it is due to an imperfection, not the Shastras. That is the method of approaching Vedic wisdom. Here, Srila Prabhupada, when he is using the word common sense, he is talking about what is very commonly understood. He is saying that what is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam is not what is commonly understood. It requires uncommon sense. Uncommon sense fundamentally is that which is blessed by coming in touch with a guru who is also blessed by his guru, etc. So what we are looking at here is he is trying to distinguish what is common as being low class versus what is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as being sublime, and that the what is considered to be understood by even a low class person cannot really be, you can't really use that same level of understanding to approach something like the Srimad Bhagavatam, because what you need here is the blessing of the guru, and you need to basically approach it from the perspective of Shastra, Sadhu, etc. You take what a common man will understand and say, if he can't understand this, then what is this all about? Or you can't really take the approach of a common man and say, what's written here should be understood by him. Because it can't be understood by him, it is not common sense. So Prabhupada is basically making a distinction. Srila Prabhupada is basically making a distinction between common sense versus uncommon sense. And here, common sense is considered to be low class. Yeah, which means you can only basically understand things that you see. Otherwise, you really can't understand anything. Yeah, basically saying you can only understand the obvious. You cannot understand what is not very obvious. That's what he's trying to convey here. Because in the material world in general, common sense is considered to be very good. Oh, you have no common sense. There's no application of common sense. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, don't bring the theory here because you will not understand Srimad Bhagavatam. This requires uncommon sense. This requires, coming in touch with the spiritual master and blessings, etc. That's what he's trying to convey. All right. So is there any other question? Okay. So we'll end the session and we will meet again in the following week. Same time. It's 5 p.m. on Indian time. It's 12:30 p.m. in the UK. And wherever else you are, it's the corresponding time frame. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.